Lauryn Hill might have chosen the most unfortunate path in her profession, transforming from an artist who's won 5 Grammy Awards, sold 20 million copies of her album, and earned an 8 times platinum certificate to a woman who got destroyed by the very thing that made her an icon. In this video, we'll take a deep dive into how Lauryn Hill's career went from grace to grass, and if there's any chance for a revival, or if it is truly over. Starting from her rise to fame. Before Hill's career went down the drain, she was just a girl who grew up in a middle-class suburb in Essex County. From an early age, it was clear that Lauryn possessed something special. Her parents, Valerie and Mal Hill, recognized her gifts and encouraged them. By the time she was 13, she was already performing at the Apollo Theater in Harlem. And even though things didn't go smoothly, she refused to let that one performance define her. At 16, Hill landed a recurring role on a soap opera, As the World Turns, playing Kira Johnson.
You gave me peace of mind.
But it was her role in the 1983 film Sister Act 2, Back in the Habit, that fully introduced Hill to a wider audience. During her time at Maplewood Columbia High, Hill met Pras and his cousin Wyclef Jean, and together they formed the Fugees. Their 1984 debut album flopped, but their 1996 follow-up, The Score, changed everything. The album reached #1 on the Billboard 200 and stayed on the charts for over 2 years. It sold more than 6 million copies in the United States alone and over 22 million copies worldwide. But for Lauryn Hill, it wasn't enough. In 1987, Hill began working on what later became her solo debut. What she created would exceed even her own expectations. It would become one of the most important albums in the history of popular music and would change her life in ways she couldn't have anticipated. The transition from being a band member to becoming a solo artist is a treacherous territory for any musician. The expectations are enormous, the scrutiny is unforgiving, and failure very public. But Lauryn Hill did not just meet those expectations, she shattered them. The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill was released on August 25, 1988. It sold 423,000 copies in its first week, a record for a female artist, and debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200. Do Wop That Thing, the album's single lead, became the first song by a solo female rapper to debut at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. At the 1999 Grammy Awards, she won 5 awards in one night, the most ever for a female artist. The album was certified 8 times platinum in the United States, eventually selling over 20 million copies worldwide. She had a perfect album, a work of art that would be studied and cherished for generations. But what she did next would surprise, confuse, and frustrate everyone who loved her music. As the world celebrated her Grammy wins and platinum plaques, Hill was navigating a profoundly complicated personal life that would ultimately shape every decision she's made about her career moving forward. The woman who had just conquered the music industry was about to make choices that would baffle her fans, frustrate her label, and redefine what success meant to her. At the center of those choices was Rowan Marley, the son of the reggae legend Bob Marley, whom Hill had met in the summer of 1996, while she was romantically involved with Wyclef during the Fugees' peak of fame. Hill saw Rowan as a connection to Bob Marley's legacy, a relationship without the professional complications that made her relationship with Wyclef painful, and a partner who wasn't competing for the spotlight. Their relationship moved very fast. By August 3, 1987, Hill gave birth to their first child, Zion David Marley, the son whom she immortalized in the song To Zion. The decision to have Zion was in itself an act of defiance against an industry that viewed pregnancy as a career liability. Hill had spoken about people in her life who had suggested she had an abortion, arguing that a child would derail her career at the worst possible time, but she refused. She chose motherhood, and that choice became one of the emotional cores of the Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. Zion was followed by Solo Luis in November 1998, born just months after The Miseducation was released. Joshua Omaru, who would later become the successful artist YG Marley, was born in 2001. John Nesta came in 2003 and Sarah was born in 2008. 5 children in 11 years with Rowan Marley, all while Hill was supposed to be at the peak of her career, releasing albums and touring the world. It was a life choice that countered every expectation the music industry had for its biggest stars. The relationship with Rowan was complex and unconventional. Despite Hill referring to Rowan as her husband in interviews and public statements, the two were never legally married. They rarely lived together for extended periods. Rowan maintained homes and business interests in different locations, and the couple spent significant portions of the relationship apart. This meant that Hill was often functioning as a single parent to multiple children while trying to maintain some semblance of her music career. The relationship finally ended between 2008 and 2009 after over a decade together. The split was quiet and private, as most things in Hill's personal life were. Then in July 2011, Hill had her sixth child, a son named Micah. She never publicly identified Micah's father, maintaining strict privacy around that aspect of her life. The children, all six of them, represented a fundamental reordering of Hill's priorities. In an industry that demands total devotion, expects artists to tour relentlessly, promote constantly, and put career over everything else, Hill chose differently. She chose to be present for her children. She chose to prioritize their childhoods over career momentum. She chose family over fame. And that choice came with a high cost professionally. Around the year 2000, at the moment she should have been working on a follow-up to the Miseducation, she largely disappeared from public view. In 1986, Hill founded the Refugee Project. It was a project that reflected her commitment to giving back to communities like the one she came from. The project's flagship program sent 100 at-risk youths aged 10 to 13 to summer camp. It also organized career day forums, academic Olympics, reading clubs, after-school programs, scholarships, and mentoring initiatives. In 1989, Hill's anti-drug campaign was rated the most effective among polled youth, with nearly 95% saying they were affected by it. That same year, she participated in the United Negro College Fund's Evening of Stars telethon that raised $13.5 million. For 6 years, the Refugee Project represented Hill's vision of what being a celebrity could be used for: tangible, meaningful change in young people's lives. Then in 2002, Hill shut it all down. The organization that sent hundreds of kids to camp, created opportunities, and opened doors simply ceased operations. It required time, energy, and focus that she felt she could no longer give while raising her children. In rare interviews Hill did during this period, she described the music industry as slavery, talked about not wanting to do obligatory things, and expressed frustration with the demands placed on her. She spoke about being commodified, about people treating her like a product rather than a human being. What Hill was experiencing, though it wouldn't be understood this way until several more years, was the specific pressure that black women in entertainment face. She was expected to be twice as good for half the recognition, to work twice as hard while making it look effortless. And when she achieved unprecedented success, she was expected to immediately do it again, to prove it wasn't a fluke, to justify the faith that had been placed on her. The choice to step back was read by many as a rejection of her fans, her talents, and her responsibilities. But to her, it was survival. While Hill was pulling back, the world wasn't stopping, the industry wasn't pausing, and her absence created space for new artists, new sounds, and new stars. Hill's next major public move would come in 2002, and it would be one of the most controversial and misunderstood releases of her career. When Lauryn Hill finally re-emerged with new music in 2002, it wasn't the triumphant return that fans and industry executives had been hoping for. Instead, it was something more raw, unpolished, and confrontational. MTV Unplugged No. 2 was recorded on July 21, 2001 at MTV Studios in Times Square, New York City. Hill was pregnant with her third child at the time, and it showed not just physically, but in the weight of the wariness that seemed to emanate from every word she sang and spoke. The performance was part of MTV's long-running Unplugged series, which had featured iconic performances from artists like Nirvana and Eric Clapton. These performances were carefully curated events designed to highlight artistry while still being commercially viable. Lauryn Hill's Unplugged was none of that. She took the stage alone with nothing but an acoustic guitar and proceeded to perform for 2 hours. The songs were not hits from the Miseducation that fans were eager to hear, though she did perform stripped-down versions of a few familiar tracks. Instead, she offered mostly new materials, unfinished songs, spiritual music, stream-of-consciousness compositions that felt more like prayers or therapy sessions rather than traditional performances. The album was released on May 7, 2002, and the reaction was swift and divided. While some fans saw it as a beautiful, wonderful, powerful album, others believed it was not horrible but kind of forgettable at a time when really great/quality music was being released. Commercially, it performed reasonably well, debuting at number 3 on Billboard 200 and even earning a platinum certificate. But compared to the Miseducation, which had sold over 400,000 copies at its first week, MTV Unplugged number 2 sold fewer copies and was widely considered a commercial disappointment. Critics were largely unkind. Reviews ranged from confused to hostile. Entertainment Weekly's David Brown called it perhaps the most bizarre follow-up in the history of popular music. The Los Angeles Times' Robert Hilburn went further, describing the album as messy as a car wreck creatively. Alex Petridis described the album as messy and inconsequential. Many critics focused on Hill's vocals, which were noticeably raspy and strained, a far cry from the powerful voice that made the Miseducation such a vocal showcase. But not everybody hated it. In 2023, In The Loop published a retrospective on the album's 21st anniversary, noting that while it was initially seen as a failure, it had gained a cult following among fans who appreciated its raw honesty and spiritual depths. But the album did not rehabilitate her reputation or reestablish her commercial viability. Rather, it raised questions about her judgment, mental state, and commitment to her career. The music industry began to move on, and for Lauryn Hill, the consequences of her choices, both personal and professional, were about to become even more severe. The MTV Unplugged album may have disappointed critics and confused fans, but what came next would do far worse than damage her artistic reputation. It would threaten her freedom and add convicted felon to the list of labels that would follow her for the rest of her life. Between 2005 and 2007, Lauryn Hill earned approximately $1.8 million in income. During those same years, she failed to file federal tax returns. This wasn't a matter of filing late or making errors on her returns. She simply didn't file at all. The decision, or perhaps more accurately, the series of decisions to avoid this responsibility, would eventually cost her dearly. In 2012, Hill pleaded guilty to 3 counts of tax fraud in federal court. The charges were serious, carrying potential sentences that could have put her in prison for years. On May 6, 2013, United States Magistrate Judge Madeline Cox Arleo sentenced Hill to 3 months in federal prison, followed by 3 additional months of home confinement. Her excuse for why she hadn't paid her taxes didn't cut it. She claimed that she had withdrawn from the music industry and public life during those years, specifically because she objected to the commodification of her art and the way the industry tried to control her. She suggested that her failure to pay taxes was connected to this withdrawal. But federal tax law is unambiguous. If you earn income, you must report it and pay taxes on it, regardless of your philosophical objections to the system or personal circumstances. On July 8, 2013, Lauryn Hill entered the Federal Correctional Institution in Danbury, Connecticut, to begin serving her sentence. For 3 months, one of the most celebrated artists of her generation was federal inmate number 562-74050. She lived in a dorm, followed the prison schedule, ate institutional food, and experienced the loss of freedom that comes with incarceration. The woman who had sung about freedom was now under full control of the federal prison system. Lauryn Hill was released on October 4, 2013, after serving her full 3-month sentence. In a move that was typically Lauryn Hill, she marked her release by dropping a new song titled Consumerism on her Tumblr page. It was her way of saying that even prison hadn't broken her spirit or changed her fundamental beliefs about art, commerce, and authenticity. The tax evasion case and subsequent imprisonment added another layer to the public's perception of Lauryn Hill. To some, it confirmed the suspicion that Hill was irresponsible, delusional, and unable to function properly, while others saw it differently. They understood that the years Hill failed to file taxes were the same years she was pulling back from the industry that she felt was so exploitative and harmful to her well-being. Hill eventually paid her debt both to the IRS and the criminal justice system, but it had already caused permanent harm to her reputation. If the tax evasion case raised serious questions about Lauryn Hill's relationship with responsibility, her now infamous pattern of chronic lateness answered those questions in the most public way possible. Night after night, city after city, in front of thousands of paying fans who had waited hours to see her perform. Hill had arrived hours late to concerts so consistently that it had become inseparable from her public identity. At the Music Hall of Williamsburg in Brooklyn, she arrived past 11 p.m. for an early evening show. At the King's Theater, also in Brooklyn, she didn't take the stage until 1 a.m., despite being scheduled for 9 p.m. At Atlanta's Chastain Park Amphitheater in 2016, she arrived more than 2 hours late, and the venue staff cut her microphone at the 11 p.m. curfew after she had performed for only 40 minutes, leaving her mid-set in front of a frustrated crowd. At Chicago's House of Blues, she arrived 50 minutes late and reportedly confronted a fan who complained. She even stated, "I do this because I love it, not because I owe you anything." At Landon's Brixton Academy, she kept the audience waiting for 90 minutes. Promoters have been reluctant to book her. Venues have inserted penalty clauses into her contracts, and fans have taken to social media to warn each other to arrive late, treating her tardiness as a predictable feature of her shows rather than an exception. Hill has addressed the issue publicly several times, with varying degrees of accountability. In November 2023 at a Los Angeles show, she made an offensive comment that went viral and was widely interpreted as dismissive of the fans' time and patience.
Late. She's late to late. Yo, y'all lucky I make it on this blood rise stage every night. Do it, I do it because I stand here in the name of God, and I do it!
In a separate statement, Hill attributed many delays to production issues beyond her control, calling media coverage of her lateness clickbait headlines, and blaming them for low ticket sales. She claimed that production delays were frequently blamed on her unfairly, and she received no support from her label following the success of the Miseducation. At the Essence Festival in July 2025, organizers themselves took responsibility for scheduling delays, suggesting that not every incident attributed to Hill is entirely her fault. But the sheer volume and inconsistency of documented incidents make it difficult to attribute the pattern entirely to external factors. And yet, paradoxically, fans keep showing up. They wait, they complain on social media, and still buy tickets for the next show. Many say it's worth every minute of the wait because her talent is undeniable, even when the professionalism is not. The lateness and legal troubles already complicated Hill's legacy, but nothing in her post-Miseducation story would prove as publicly damaging and as legally consequential as the collapse of the Fugees reunion and the lawsuit that followed it. In 2023, the Fugees announced a reunion tour to celebrate the 25th anniversary of their iconic album, The Score. The prospects generated a lot of excitement. Fans who had grown up with the group's music saw it as a chance to witness something they thought would never happen again. Hill, Wyclef, and Pras on the stage together, performing the songs that had defined a generation. The tour began with genuine promise, but ended almost immediately after it began. Midway through the scheduled dates, the tour was cancelled, with Hill citing vocal strain as the reason. A 2024 reunion was announced through Live Nation, comprising 18 United States shows with the scheduled start date of August 9, 2024. Then, just 3 days before the tour was about to begin, all 18 dates were quietly cancelled, and once again, Hill attributed the cancellation to clickbait headlines that she claimed had created a negative narrative around the tour, suppressing ticket sales and making the dates commercially unviable. Fans who purchased tickets were left disappointed and frustrated, and the music industry took notice. On October 1st, 2024, Pras filed a lawsuit against Hill in the Southern District of New York. The allegations were very serious and specific. Pras alleged fraud, breach of contract, breach of fiduciary duty, and refusal to permit a financial audit of their proceeds. According to the lawsuit, Hill had taken 40% of all tour guarantees off the top before splitting the remaining 60% 3 ways amongst the group's members. The lawsuit further claimed that Hill siphoned from the tour budget and inflated expenses unnecessarily, leaving Pras with approximately $900,000 in unrecouped losses from the 2023 tour alone. Among the lawsuit's most striking allegations was the claim that Hill had rejected a $5 million Coachella offer solely because No Doubt had been offered higher billing. The suit also claimed that Hill had asked Pras to perform Fugees songs for free alongside her son YG Marley at Coachella, an arrangement that would have benefited Hill while causing Pras significant income. Hill responded swiftly, calling the lawsuit baseless and full of false claims and unwarranted attacks. She claimed that Pras had received a $3 million advance intended partly to cover his legal fees from a separate federal case. Pras had been convicted in 2023 on charges related to an illegal lobbying scheme connected to Malaysian financier Joe Low and had never paid it. Hill admitted that the entire reunion had been conceived partly to help Pras generate income to address legal debt. Pras responded by releasing a diss track called Bar Mitzvah in August 2024, taking the dispute from the courtroom to the internet. As of February 2025, the lawsuit remains pending in federal court with no public resolution. There have been no announcements of settlement discussions, scheduled hearings, or trial dates, leaving the Fugees' legacy entangled in litigation. Through every controversy, every legal battle, every late performance, and every cancelled tour, one question has followed Lauryn Hill as a shadow for 26 years. Where's the second album? The silence is staggering when you consider the context. Artists far less talented than Hill have released dozens of albums since the Miseducation. Labels have risen and fallen. Entire genres have been born, peaked, and faded. And still, the woman who created one of the greatest albums in music history has released exactly one record in her entire solo career. It wasn't due to a lack of resources or opportunities. Columbia Records, unwilling to give up their most celebrated artist, spent over $2.5 million by 2003 funding sessions for a follow-up album. They went as far as installing a fully equipped recording studio in Hill's Miami apartment. Hill had spoken about why, though her explanations were uncharacteristically complex. In a widely discussed statement, she wrote, "After the Miseducation, there were scores of tentacled obstructionists, politics, repressing agendas, unrealistic expectations, and saboteurs everywhere." She also stated pointedly that the wild thing is that no one from my label has ever called me and asked how we can help you make another label. Ever. These are the words of a person who felt abandoned and overwhelmed simultaneously, left alone to navigate impossible expectations without meaningful support. The industry, it seems, wanted the product without the person. There have been recent glimmers of hope. In May 2004, Hill's son, YG Marley, dropped a bombshell that gladdened the hearts of fans.
An album. We need a second album from her. Is she close to doing that, or what can you tell us? I know she's kind of been back and forth with that idea.
Music's on the way.
For real this time? Don't listen. Don't get as excited about it.
And the best part was her response to this bombshell.
Miss Hill, your son said that we
Get
can
one,
expect some new
please.
music
Let's
from
go,
you.
guys. Thank you.
Really? How soon? Maybe end of year, next year?
So thank you.
Thank you, Miss Hill. Have a great day.
Whether soon translates into reality remains to be seen. Despite everything, the prison sentence, the lawsuits, the cancelled tours, the lateness, the missing albums, Lauryn Hill remains standing, and remarkably, her legacy hasn't been stronger despite her flaws. In 2024, she performed at Coachella alongside her son YG Marley and Wyclef, informing the new generation of exactly who she is. She performed at the Essence Festival in July 2025 and experienced the most embarrassing moment she never thought she'd come across. She performed to a nearly empty audience after she arrived late to the festival. Her artist in residence has continued drawing audiences across Canada and Europe. Sold-out venues in city after city prove that the public's appetite for Lauryn Hill is essentially undiminished. The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill was named the #1 album on Apple Music's list of 100 best albums of all time, ranked above every Beatles record, every Michael Jackson album, and every cultural touchstone the 20th century produced. That is a definitive statement of artistry immortality. Her son, YG Marley, has emerged as a successful artist in his own right, carrying forward a musical legacy that connects from Bob Marley to Lauryn Hill to a new generation. Hill still holds the most Grammy Awards won by a female rapper, 8 in total, a record that has stood unshaken for over 2 decades and remains unbroken. Lauryn Hill's story is not a tragedy. It's not a cautionary tale. It's something far more complicated and far more human than those simple narratives allow. She made choices. Some were brave, choosing motherhood over momentum, authenticity over commerce, and silence over compromise, while others were costly. Tax evasion, broken professional relationships, and unfulfilled promises to fans who deserved better. But here's the undeniable truth. One album, 26 years, and it's still #1. Most artists release a dozen albums and are still forgotten. Lauryn Hill released one and became immortal. And although she's thriving